Um, so to get started, the normal disclaimer, if you try something that we talk about tonight and it doesn't work, it's your fault, not mine or the club's. So with that, let's get going. The first thing I'm going to do is put up a poll. And so let me get this started. So let's just find out the experience level this year for everybody that's on the call. So just, check the events you've attended this year at the top. And I'll give you just a second to do that. It'll be helpful to know, helpful for me to know who all's on, well, I can see who's on the call, but how much experience you have this year.
And how do we reply to the poll?
I'm sorry?
How do we reply to the poll? Is it something through the Zoom?
The poll?
Yeah.
You should be getting the poll on your phone, yeah, on your screen.
It's not letting me check anything.
Yeah, Bill, it's not letting us submit it.
It worked for me, and I was able to submit it.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think you have to make a choice for both option 1 and 2.
Oh,
Yeah, if you haven't been to any of these events, then it's not going to let you submit.
okay. I'm going to lie. I'm going to say I'm going to watch who's going to.
Yeah, well, there are 2 questions, so yeah, really complicated questions, I know, but all right, well, I'm going to end the poll, and we'll see what the results look like. So we got a lot of people on the call who've been to a number of events, and then a third of people have not been to any events other than some NNJR events this year. So so thank you for that, and I'm going to take that off. Get that out of the way. So with that, I'm going to dive in. The topic tonight is focus on learning, but fact check. So we're really going to talk a lot about how to learn on track. And I'm going to do that in 2 phases. The first one, the basics, I'm going to go through very fast because everybody on this call should know 90% of what's there. So it's more of a refresher, a reminder. But at the second, in the main meat of what I'm going to cover, I'm going to go through 6 categories of topics that where you may find some ideas and ways to improve how you think about learning on track. And I've come across a number of what I think are interesting ideas here. Some of these were new to me, and hopefully will be give you a couple of things you can take away to try at Lightning or your next event. So with that, I'm going to dive right in. As usual, I'm going to go fast, but please interrupt me with a chat comment, or just unmute your microphone and jump in. I don't mind that at all. So the basics, very simple, right? If you want to learn on track, you have to decide you want to learn. I mean, there's nothing wrong with driving on track to have fun and to go out and have a good time. And if that's your objective, that's fine. However, if you want to improve, and learn or improve could be used interchangeably here, then obviously you have to decide to do that. Once you decide that you want to learn more, then the next step is to prioritize. And if you're going to a new track, it's pretty simple. You have to learn the track. If it's a familiar track, then think more about, is it, I want to work on braking? Do I want to work on turn 1 or turn 5 or turn 7 or fill in the blank with whatever. And then from that, set some goals, but maybe there's a goal or an objective for a whole event, but 1 or 2 goals for each session on track. Pretty basic stuff. There's lots of reasons why this stuff works. You can read all kinds of books, and there's even lots of learning theory behind all that. So before the event, you can get ready. And visualization, mental programming, mental imagery, whatever words you like. But here's a caveat that sometimes gets missed. If you're visualizing driving lightning, you want to visualize driving a perfect lap. Turn in points at exactly the right point, braking at the right point, off the brakes at the right point, very gently and smoothly, and so on. And so that you're practicing perfect execution, because that's what's going into your brain as you're practicing. If you do have video or data, if not, you have track notes, review the last time you were at Lightning, look for both examples of good and areas to improve. If you're looking for a video and you don't have video, there is one on the NNJR website that you can use to look at to refresh yourself. And then write down the goals and prepare yourself some debrief sheets. At the track, review your goals before a run. That's why they're written down, so you can look at them again. And you have time. If you have time, it certainly helps to do more visualization with the same caveat. And there's lots of reasons why mental imagery works. Some of you will remember that Ross Bentley, when we listened to him, talked about this book, Thinking Body, Dancing Mind, that talks about kind of some of the science behind that. And there's lots of other science out there behind why this stuff works. Once you're at the track, if you're focused on braking, then when you're on track, you need to be hyper aware of how the car is responding to your braking efforts. If you're focused on a particular turn, extra focus on that turn. That'll help, cement in your brain what you're working on. And very important to debrief immediately after you get off the track. Write down what you saw, heard, and felt. And I'm going to have a lot more to say about this later on, and including goals for the next session. So, and this slide you've seen before, most of you. I introduced this deliberate practice slide in the Watkins Glen presentation about how to learn or relearn the track, the car, traffic, as well as sensory input. And there is there's a deliberate practice reminder sheet on the website that if you don't have it printed out, you should have that along with track maps to make notes on. So I'm not going to explain this tonight, but if you haven't looked at this and used it, that would be a great place to start, because many of you hopefully saw the article I wrote in Porsche Force about me applying this approach at Watkins Glen 1, and I found it very useful. And I've had similar input from other drivers. So this is really very a practical way to improve how you're on track. And the information that's going to follow builds on this. So if you don't have some of this in place, some of what I'm going to talk about won't be as useful. Now, there's always some cautions. If you're trying to learn, it doesn't work if you're not in the right frame of mind, or you're mad, you're tired. You get to staging and you tell yourself, well, did I check the tire pressures or not? So there's lots of things that can get in the way of learning. The solution, or one solution, is if you have a negative thought that you're pulling into staging or getting ready to go to staging, and something negative pops into your head, consciously tell yourself to throw that thought out. I'll use the tire pressure example. You're not sure you checked the tire pressures. Well, throw that thought out and tell yourself, if the tires get overheated, I will recognize that. And hold on a second. Okay. I'll recognize that the tires are getting overheated, and I'll drive around it, or I'll otherwise make an adjustment. But the point is, replace that negative thought with a positive thought. And don't go on the track with that negative, weighing in the back of your mind is the punchline here. Okay, so those are the basics. Like I said, hopefully there wasn't very much new for most people on this call. So we're going to talk about 6 proven ways to, if you will, improve how you learn on track. And one caution before we do that, as we learn or make improvements, we obviously want to do that in small steps as a part of our overall goal and plan of action. And we repeat those small steps. As Jackie Stewart once said, it's not always possible to be the best. It's always possible to improve on a gentle, smooth, and progressive basis. So that's what we're talking about here. Everybody on this call has a fair amount of driving experience. We're not going to make major, leaps in terms of how we're going to drive. We're going to improve on an incremental basis. So first topic here seems pretty simple, but it's very important. And that is, understand why. If you're working to improve, and whether it's something you've thought about, or something I've suggested, or a coach has suggested, or you've read in an article or seen in a video, it could be a line, or the car's understeering, or whatever. Try to understand why. And this may be pretty obvious, but why matters, because if we go on the track and try something and we don't really understand why, we could end up with an ugly incident. And if we don't have confidence that we know why we're doing something, then we don't have confidence on track. And so if anyone, myself included, tells you to try something and you don't understand why, keep asking why, and don't move on until you get it. I mean, this may seem pretty basic, but I think most of us have seen people violate this, try things where they didn't really understand what the reason was. Now, you can get better at asking yourself why. One way, and instructors have all learned this, is to explain to others what you're doing. Because now you got to think about it some more and be able to explain it, and try to maybe make something that's complicated simpler. And plus, you're reinforcing it in your own mind. I ran across this great set of quotes from Albert Einstein that helps here. Early in his career, he apparently said, all physical theories ought to lend themselves to so simple a description even a child can understand them. Later, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And I really think that last comment, that last one really says, if you can't explain, why in a simple fashion, then you don't understand it. And that's good advice for all of us as we go forward. Progress measurement. We're trying to improve. Well, how are we going to measure that? Well, lap times are an obvious answer, but there's a lot more than just lap times. Was a good lap time easy to drive, or were you hanging on to the ragged edge? Do you know why it was fast versus slow? Do you know, because of brakes, or because of, it could be lots of reasons, right? Well, if you have data, some of these questions need to be asked both before and after you look at the data to understand, obviously a fast lap where you're, hanging on by the ragged edge is not the same as a fast lap that was easy. And in fact, most people on this call know that for the majority of drivers, fast laps happen when they're not trying hard, when they're relaxed and focusing on good technique, and as opposed to when they're pushing to try to go fast. There's some other ways we can measure progress besides just the numbers, and think of a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 5 rating. Say you're working on braking, and you want to work on brake release for the next session. Well, when you come in from that session, rate yourself on brake release, or maybe do that over several sessions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good was my brake release? Well, maybe it was a 6 this session. So next session, I want to do slightly better. I want to make it a 7. And you can apply this obviously to any aspect of driving, but it's a way that focuses your attention both on track and immediately when you get off the track on how well you did. And you can apply it, as I said, to pretty much any aspect of driving. Now, we've been talking about goals and setting goals, but what is our goal or our target? What are we measuring against? Well, here's a thought that your target ought to be that perfect lap that you visualized when you were thinking about driving Lightning or any other track. So you've got that perfect lap. Well, obviously, most of us aren't driving that perfect lap. So how do we think about our goal? Well, there's a gap between where we are now and that perfect lap. And if we think about that gap and, think about what it would take to reduce that gap, now we give ourselves some meat, if you will, for a goal. And this is, many people in business are used to gap analysis. It's not a new thought, but applied to how we think about setting targets on track, I had never thought about it in that context until I ran across this this particular article. Now, some specific concrete suggestions as you're thinking about debriefing, getting off the track. If you're needing to improve, hopefully you're taking notes when you get off track. Well, Ross Bentley has a nice video on the why and what of track map notes, the links in the slides that you got. If you need it, just email me and I'll send it to you. He provides details on references, driving technique, and car aspects in terms of taking notes. So this will give you a good place to start if you're looking to improve how you're taking notes. Even better, if I can get to, here we go. Here's a whole host of additional suggestions from one of the Speed Secrets weekly emails. And this driver talked about how to improve your track notes. And there's a long list of things here you can ask yourself if you're capturing. Some of them are pretty obvious, the normal, crack in a pavement, a tree or whatever. He mentioned sound cues, you could write down on your track map, if the engine, makes a particular noise, or the curbs make a particular noise on a specific corner. Obviously elevation and track conditions and so on. And then the ones I've highlighted at the bottom here are ones we've talked about in the past. End of braking, throttle pickup, throttle application point, full throttle, wide open throttle. And then here's those scales again. And we'll talk about this, we'll reinforce this again, but, brake pedal pressure on a scale of 1 to 10, coming into turn 1 at lightning. How much brake pressure are you going to use? Is it a 10, a 9, an 8.5? What is it? Brake pedal release. He uses R1 through R5. You could use 1 to 10 if you wanted, but R1 might be very rapid brake release. R5 might be very slow brake release. Same thing with steering. And to see that track note, this driver's track notes a little bit better, here it is full screen. It's still very hard to see. I had to look at this a while because when I first looked at it, I saw the normal, brake here, turn in here, but he does have, kind of S1, S3, and some of those things noted on the track. So a lot of good ideas if you want to make better track notes. Here's a good checklist to think about. And to even improve that more, here's a suggestion on how to do great driver debriefs. In other words, how to debrief when you get in off the track. And at the bottom here, you see this sketch that says, as a driver, you have a lot of sources of information about your driving. You have lap times, if you have tire pressure and other data. You have video, you have basic data, advanced data. But the driver is the fastest, quickest source of information. And that's the whole point here is you want to take advantage of that as quickly as you can while it's still fresh in the driver's mind. So we've already talked about debriefing immediately when you get off the track and using a track map. But how to structure that debrief, how to make it more precise, and how to add depth. That's what we're going to talk about next. So how to structure that debrief? Well, start with the first thing to write down is one area to improve on from this run. If you just came in and you said, I really wasn't driving turn 7 right at all, I really need to work better on turn 7. Well, that goes at the top of the list. And then next, a standard set of topics. And obviously you can set your own list. Some people would start with reference points. That's what I typically start with, and then go to braking and brake release and so on. But whatever it is, whatever you're comfortable with is fine. But here's an important caveat that I had not thought about until I thought this through and was reading this piece. If we're working on reference points, go around the whole track. Make notes around the reference points on turn 1, on turn 2, on 3, and so on, all the way around the track. When you're finished with that, then go to braking and make the notes about braking around the track, and then brake release and so on. And if you set yourself up a habit of using the same sequence for each debrief, now it becomes more efficient. And guess what? You're going to remember more and capture more information. So I think, really useful, practical advice here. And then you saw this earlier, add precision with, 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 scales on things like brake release, braking, steering. Could even apply it to if the car isn't handling well, if it's understeering, you could say, U1 for, for a small amount of understeer, or U4 for a lot of understeer, and so on. So these kinds of thinking about rating characteristics that you care about, makes a lot of sense. And then think about corner phases. This could be particularly useful if you're focused on improving how you get through a particular corner. Break it into the 4 phases, braking in a straight line, corner entry, mid-corner, corner exit, and make your notes accordingly. If, it's not uncommon for a car to understeer at corner entry and then either not understeer or even oversteer, at either mid-corner, corner exit, for example. Capture those nuances, and you'll have a better understanding of what's happening. Now, I'm switching gears here from debriefs, and topic 5, which is coaching. Obviously, there are lots of coaching resources, but one that I want to make sure you're aware of is the self-coaching resources that Ross Bentley has available at the link that's here. There's questions, templates, a debrief form, and his "if all else fails" is a good set of questions if you're struggling with any particular topic on track. And those are readily available resources. I'm sure some of you have used them. It's good stuff. An underutilized resource for, in my opinion, by advanced drivers are instructors and chief instructors. I was reminded of this at Watkins Glen too. I was one of the chief instructors along with Mike Carr. I happened to be in the pits when Mike was on track, and one of the drivers at the event came up to me, and we had like a 10-minute discussion about a braking question or technique he was working on. And hopefully he found it useful. And I was struck by the fact that seldom happens. That, maybe most drivers aren't aware that the chief instructors, 90% of the time that we're in the pits, there's nothing going on. So we'd be happy to have a conversation. We hope it's 100% of the time that we have nothing going on track so that we don't have to deal with the issues. But point is, whether it's a chief instructor or instructors, if you are working on a corner or a technique or whatever else it is, ask and have that conversation and take advantage of those resources. And then, of course, there are lots of arguments for a pro coach. This has been a huge, increase in pro coaches in driver's ed over the last few years. And the arguments are it's inexpensive versus track time. It's a faster way to learn and improve. They can help you with data and so on. And of course, that assumes they're compatible with your personality. So coaching's out there as a resource for those who want to take advantage. And my last topic here is really not well, it might be a technique, I suppose, but this talks about getting into the zone. And hopefully most people are familiar with what it means to be in the zone, to whether that's driving or any other sport or even, in other endeavors. So, but basically it means, really tuned in, really focused and almost not being aware consciously of what's going on. And you've all heard professional athletes talk about this, and professional drivers. Well, nothing says those of us on track, couldn't aspire to, to get to this point as well. Particularly since it's an individual thing. It's not a comparison to somebody else. It's a comparison to our individual skills. Now, that said, there's lots of things that get in the way. This chart kind of tries to explain that being in the zone means we found the optimum combination of challenge to match our skills. In other words, we're doing something that's challenging, that's using our skills. It's not so hard that we can't do it, which would move you to the left here and make you nervous or anxious. It's not so easy that we get bored and relaxed. In other words, so we're being challenged and we're using our skills at a high level. And that's what flow or being in the zone is about on a, if you will, a technical level. There's lots of barriers to getting into the zone. The same ones we talked about before: stress, pressure. You can reduce those, improve the state of mind by replaying a past success. Doesn't even have to be while you're driving. It could be a success in business. It could be a success in another sport. This could happen if you find yourself pulling into staging and you're feeling pressured. Then replay a past success. Get rid of that bad thought, like I said earlier. The other thing is you have to be in your comfort zone. If you're outside your comfort zone, then you tense up and lose confidence. And this is a fine line here, because we don't want to try to do things that are totally beyond our skill set. But if we're challenging ourselves, we're going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And the solution is similar, but more. Replay that past success, and then do the mental imagery and see yourself doing what it is you're trying to do and doing it successfully, and repeat it. And this will help get your mind focused where you want it focused. In more detail, here's almost a checklist for those of you that are interested in how to trigger getting into the zone. And so it starts with writing down 6 words or phrases that capture what being in the zone means for you. And there's some questions here that help you think about that. No magic. What does it feel like? What are the emotions? What's the timing? What's your focus like? But write down those 6 words or phrases that capture being in the zone in your mind. And then as a second step, and these are things you can do before you get to the track, think about a great moment or experience, a time when you performed really at your best. And that could be doing anything: sports, music, hobby, anything. And, think about where that was. How did you feel, before it, after it? And then give it a name. Maybe it was playing tennis against George. So, George's tennis match. Or maybe it was a great hike with the family, and it's a family hike. But give it a label. And then at the track, before driving, you can relax, read the 6 words or phrases, and then replay that great experience by restating George's tennis match, or family hike, whatever it happens to be. These things will get your mind in the direction that you want it to be in, to perform at your very best on the track. So we've covered a lot of ground in a relatively short time, as I said we would. Hopefully the basics, remind you of some of the things that you're already doing, and these additional topics have given you some additional tools that you can pull from as you get ready to go to lightning. In summary, the basics are required, obviously, to learn on track, and hopefully you all have those mastered. There are proven ways to improve learning. Most drivers don't take advantage of those enough because they do take some effort. And so the challenge I leave you with is, think about how much effort you're willing to put in to take advantage of some of those tools and ideas that we just talked about. And then one last, if I can get this to move, fact check here, is you. The advice that you get from me or anybody else, it has to fit. If it's not comfortable for you, if it's too complicated, then don't try it. You have to be comfortable. You have to internalize whatever it is that you're doing when you're on track. So that's maybe stating the obvious, but it kind of goes back to the why thing of don't do anything that you don't understand. Because at the end of the day, the most important part of this is to be safe. So with that, questions, comments, I will stop this here and see if anybody has any comments or suggestions to jump in with. Just unmute your microphone if you want to speak up.
Well, I have a question, Joe. Thanks for the great presentation. Something you mentioned, right? So once you do a lot of driving, at some point it actually becomes difficult. Like early on, it's easier to make the calls about, okay, well, I definitely didn't do the good job in like turn 1 or turn 5. But then once you become more and more advanced, it becomes actually very difficult to figure out how you can improve. You just say, this is my best time, and it's very difficult to beat it. And it's like you can do, the whole session trying to chase it, and then you come off the track, and it's so frustrating. You haven't improved the time, but you really don't even know where to start, where you can actually find that time without looking at the data. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, I understand your question, and it's a common, what you just outlined is a very common situation where a driver, has driven quite a bit, has experience, is getting around the track nicely, and wants to go faster and tries to go faster, and it generally doesn't work. And the way to go faster is to work on techniques, and to work and you can do that. You can pick some, or you can do it just sort of what would the word be? In rotation. You could simply take the topics that are in the deliberate practice worksheet and do one per session. So take session 1 and work on reference points. Go out, focus on your reference points. Don't worry about how fast you're going. Just focus on your reference points. When you come in, write down any new reference points or anything you learned, from your reference points. On the next session, you might work on your brake application, for the whole session. And again, you'd come in, you would write down your notes and so on. Next session, you might work on brake release. And if you were to do that for 3 or 4 sessions, I almost guarantee you'll end up going faster. And it's because, as Ross Bentley likes to say, advanced driving is not, there's no silver bullet. It's simply doing the basics better. And if we do the basics better on technique, we end up going faster. It seems in some ways too good to be true, and in other ways too simplistic. But in in practice, that's what happens, at least in my experience.
Bill, I think a good suggestion as well is if anybody's stuck in kind of the advanced group, they should just have somebody ride with them. A good chief, a good instructor that has maybe a similar setup and car as you, and that you know is faster than you, right? So I think that's a good way to very quickly get some pointers. You know, maybe it's technique in attacking a specific turn, but maybe it's fundamentally how you're releasing the brake, how much speed you're carrying through the corner, how committed you are to the gas, you know, once you're in mid-corner. I mean, it's these types of things that sometimes if you're just going around in circles, you just don't think of it, or you get frustrated and you definitely can't think of it, right? So an external party, third party that observes how you're driving and, you know, has experience can probably give you a few pointers to work on. And, you know, then you can certainly follow what Bill absolutely is correct in saying is just work on a few things and see how your comfort level increases as well as your lap time decreases.
Yeah, Bill, this is Tom. I want to build on what Lester said. I mean, there's two parts, you know, two other avenues that go along with that. One, you know, you take a chief or another instructor out, particularly a chief, because that's what we're there for, particularly, is to say, oh, yeah, I felt a really abrupt brake release there. And then you waited for the car to get stable. And then you got on the gas and you're kind of wondering like, wow, it took forever to get on the gas. You may not realize that because you're so used to doing exactly what you're doing. And you've become, you know, that kind of unconscious confident, but you're not really performing as well as you could. The second is to take a ride with a chief now that we can actually get two people in a car now and experience those corners or that corner from the passenger seat, because that may be your key to how you learn, but you haven't been in that right seat for a while and therefore you're blocked. You say, oh, wow, he really turned in or smoother, or they got on the brakes later, harder, or I felt a different level of balance in the car. So you learn that way. And then the third could be, which is more self-instructive. You know, people like to do timing of laps. I think it's more important to do timing of segments. And so if you have the ability to time your laps, you have the ability to time your segments. And so if you want to do self-instructive, you say, all right, let me time this segment for, say, from, you know, entry into turn 2 at Watkins Glen to the bus stop. What was that? And then you begin to say, well, let me just change something different. Let me hold that apex longer. Let me get on the gas sooner. You try one thing and see how did that change my segment time, but focus on one thing, one segment. And I think that helps because people measure, they have all this data, but you know, you did fantastic in turn 1, but you got in a train at turn 4. Well, you're not going to learn anything unless you look at segment time. So there's 3 options there for you to experience.
And if you don't have data in the car, just pay attention to when you're upshifting, whether or not you're hitting the rev limiter. For me, when I'm at the Glen, I know I'm going, you know, as fast as I can. If I'm hitting the rev limiter before the bus stop.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't. So I knew that. So I know, hey, you know, maybe I wasn't as solid as I was coming out of turn 1, which is really where that all starts.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. That's a great point.
Going up the heel, going up the toe, and where I upshift there. You know, if I upshift way before the flagger station, I know actually that I did the heel really well because I was carrying enough speed and momentum going up the hill. But if I shift at the flagger, then I know, oh, gee, you know, I was a little slow off the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lester. Because I know I had some coaching with Dave Scott and a couple of years ago, and one of the things he said, oh man, we got 5,000 more RPM at this point. Like, oh, okay, yeah, that meant something. And those kind of little triggers are fantastic without actually having real data.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah, Pete Trapeg, and I just recently got my data management system working, and I just the other night finally took a look at myself driving along, and I was amazed at what I could see when you're not behind the wheel and you're watching yourself behind the wheel. So I don't know if you have any comments about that, but I look forward to using it more often now that I know how to use it.
Well, yeah, more and more people, Pete, are using data, and if there's a caution, it's that there's a fairly steep learning curve, but perhaps the bigger caution is that people may try to do too much too soon. So you want to look at the basics, speed trace, and let other people jump in on the simple things to look at, but look at one or two things, starting with the speed trace, and look at the shape of, when you slow down, is it a steep slope down, and so on. And if you focus on a few simple things, then yes, data can show you some things, and it is complicated by exactly the issue that Tom Orvolino mentioned earlier, that if there's traffic, then just looking at lap times isn't usually that helpful, because many laps are impacted by traffic, and so you can't see that until you look at video and the data and so on. But looking at the shape of the curves is a great place to start.
Yeah, I was kind of focusing on my use of throttle. And with the video, you can see where you are on the track and if you have any traffic. But, being on, off the throttle, whether you're coasting, I found that was really helpful.
Great. Good. Well, that's, that's a good thing to be doing. And like I said, more and more people are doing it. So that's great.
Yeah. I also think too, there's a number of drivers and chiefs that have learned how to use data. And if you've got data in your car, you're like, okay, I'm collecting data, but what do I do with it?
Yeah.
Besides just measuring an overall lap time or segment times, which is a great place to start, by the way. But talk to some of the drivers and chiefs that use data to say, how are you using data to learn how to become a better driver? I know there's certain chiefs like Dyke Henson. I could see him right there. He's a great expert on that. On just one corner, brake, on the gas, off the gas. How do I look at that, and what is it telling me about what I'm doing? And just pick one corner, one segment, if that. Versus, oh my God, I got all these squiggly lines. What am I looking at? You'll drive yourself nuts. I guarantee it. But just again, one corner, one segment. Talk to someone that knows what they're talking about relative to data, and work on that. And again, think about all the instructors in this group here. What do we tell a lot of our students? They have goals. Well, pick the hardest corner. What's the one corner you want to work on this session or the next sessions? We don't try to envelope the whole run. We say, what's that one corner, or what's that one technique? And we, as advanced drivers, need to approach it the same way. Break that down into principal components, and what can you do with it? Even if it's just, as Lester said, which is fantastic, speed or what was the tachometer saying? I mean, there's some great data that's available to everyone all the time.
Yep. Okay. Other comments, questions? Any interest in doing a turn-by-turn? No,
always interested in doing turn-by-turns.
I see several heads nodding. So
well, all right. Somebody drive. We're not driving.
All right. Well,
Bill, can I jump in there? Because
please.
Turn-by-turn, that's a good point. I'm going back to the question about you're plateauing as a driver, and you're not reducing your times. There's techniques, and then there's also a strategy that you put together where if you're really there's speed and there's lap times. They're not always the same thing. If you're concentrating on lap times, there's a couple key corners that will make all the difference on any track. And so if you're really interested in reducing your lap times, those are the corners you focus on. So coming out of 1 and being able to stay in the throttle, going into 2 and up through the S's, if you can do that, you will have a good lap time at Watkins Glen. If you can't do that, no matter really what you do on the rest of the course, you're never going to make that up. That's literally half the track. So when you look at a track, and it goes back to the old adage, the most important turn on a track is the one that leads to the longest straightaway. We can change that by saying the most important turn on a track is the one that gives you the opportunity to have the car at full throttle for the longest period of time. And so if you're trying to strategize on just how to bring down your lap time, that's where you spend your time. The use of data is really interesting because we all believe that the scariest turn on the track is the one that if I only had a little more bravery, I would have a faster lap time. And when you look at data, that will quickly dispel that notion. You will realize that there's a couple turns that you thought you had mastered, but if you did those turns better, you can take off tenths, if not, half a second. And that turn that scares the hell out of you is probably only worth a tenth or maybe 1.5 tenths. So that's one of the benefits of using data too. And as Tom says, that fits hand in hand with segment times.
And it's also like speed versus over time, right? Because you're thinking about lightning. What do they call the light bulb or whatever that big long thing is before the front straight? 2 miles an hour through that whole light bulb will make a hell of a difference.
Yep.
So then the question is, do you really know the limit of your car's grip and the tire's grip? Because sometimes people aren't there yet, right? They think they are, but they're not. So then it's a matter of learning how to read basically the limit of adhesion on a turn like that. And that makes a hell of a difference. And same thing with Watkins Glen, coming out of the bus stop, right, and down the chute. That's a really long turn.
Yep.
And if you get 2 miles an hour steady across that whole turn, makes a whole hell of a difference.
Yep.
In terms of the lap time.
Okay. All right, turn by turn. So let me do this. All right, so we have slides with the normal disclaimer. Everybody knows the passing zones, I hope. Right side on the front straight, right side between 1 and 2, mainly left side, between 5 and 7, although coming out of 5, you can pass on the right. Between 7 and 8, depends on where you are. So, so I think everyone here should know the passing zones, but if you have questions, jump in. I'm going to skip on that. So turn 1, when you look at it this way, it's not even a 90-degree turn, right? So, and uphill helps us slow the car down. Hold on, got something going on. Somebody asked about expanded passing. I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming expanded passing in red and black's most likely, but that's up to the chiefs to decide, but most likely. So uphill as we come into it, but what really, determines how this corner works is the hill that's before you approach track out or as you're approaching track out. because all of a sudden the car gets light, so we have to do a lot to respect that that hill. Whoops, come on. All right, bear with me a second. Okay, so heavy braking zone. But the car really slows down when we get into the hill, right? So we can carry a little bit of brake in here, although common mistake, too much trail brake into this corner because we really do want to get the car settled and pointed going straight over the hill. Some people like to drive on the curbing here. Depends on whether your car is upset by that or not. Some cars definitely don't like to be on the curb there. Your choice, but I'm sure it's faster if your car can do it and you can do it, but those are big caveats. The hill, we have to be in control going over, right? And in a powerful car, you got to feather the gas here coming over the hill. This corner eats cars if you get in too hot or too early and try to hold it on. So there's lots of real estate in the off to the left here. So if you do find the car light or running wide or whatever, just drive it off. Lots of room. But
perfect example of where you go when things go wrong by looking at those tracks.
Yep.
Much better to get a little dust in your wheels than to try and hold it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there have been some, I'm sad to say, nasty accidents in this corner, which we don't want to see any of. 2, 3, and 4 are connected corners, and really the fact that they're connected really dictates how they're driven. If you look at this overhead carefully, you realize that there's almost no distance between 3 and 4, and not a lot between 2 and 3. And since everybody on this call knows that's a big arc, it really ends up being one sequence. Now, there is a short straightaway after 4, so that really dictates how we drive this section. We want to set 4 up to be able to accelerate out of it. So bottom line, we end up having to compromise 3 enough to set up 4. And working backwards from there, okay, so we carry as much speed out of, through 2 and toward 3 as we can get away with. That ends up being car dependent and driver dependent, but that's the why of how this should be driven, in my opinion. People with other opinions are welcome to jump in, but that's what it looks like.
I'll give you another opinion, Bill.
Okay.
You can look at this as turn 4 is your, or turn 3 is your compromise turn to set up turn 4 so that you can drive out under throttle. Another way to look at it, a turn that Dennis Macchio uses, is you can look at this as a reverse compromise set of corners. So if you can roll speed through 2 and 3, and it doesn't allow you to get fully over to the right before you go into 4, you can break into the apex. And the question is, do you carry more speed or do you shave more time by rolling speed through 2 and 3 and pointing the car at the exit and apex and breaking into the apex, and then rotating the car and jumping on the gas? Which is faster? What I have found is that turning around, reversing the whole notion of a compromised corner, and just saying I'm going to roll as much speed through 2 and 3, knowing that I can't get fully over to the right to make 4, but I'll break into 4 and be able to pick up the throttle. And it's for me, it's a lot faster because I'm carrying a higher speed for a longer period of time. And the people that go way out to the right and then jump on the gas, if you recall, that's kind of a funky corner, and it doesn't have a lot of banking or grip. So maximizing your throttle coming out of there is a not always doesn't always happen. So I look at this as a reverse compromise situation. I roll the speed through the first 2, give up on 4, and then get the car straight and get back on gas. So different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and it's a reasonable way to look at it. Again, car and driver dependent. In a car with a fair amount of horsepower like yours, and a car that will turn pretty well like yours, that probably works. In a lower powered car, it might still work, it might not, I don't know. A lot depends on how well the car turns.
Yep.
Here, because my car that doesn't like to turn, this is a tough sequence. So it really does depend. Now, the one point that I would agree with is that, well, two points. There's no reason to force yourself, to get all the way track right exiting 3, just to make 4 look better. So for sure, I would agree that usually, and I don't care what the car is, we don't necessarily have to force ourselves track right. And number 2, even if we are focused on getting out of 4 in an efficient way, we can carry a lot of speed through 2 and into 3. Maybe not as much as you are, but we can still carry a lot of speed. So 2, in any equation here, 2 wants to be maximized, and as much a 3 as we can get away with, depending on the car. So yes, 2 is just the extension of the straight between 1 and 3, basically. It's a way to think about this. In almost any car, is, at least that's how I would think about it.
Yeah, and this is Tom. I've worked my way to driving the same line as Dyke. You maximize that, and I'll go into 4 a little bit heavier, and then brake there, and then come get myself sorted out, getting ready for 5. But I think a big component of that is looking how you're treating corner 2 apex. And a lot of drivers, you see a lot of people going different ways. They're right on the apex, they're a foot off it, they're half a car off it. That has a lot to do with how you're going to change that sequence from 2, 3, 4, whether you're going to follow the line and stay full right after 3 to catch the late apex on 4. So it's playing with where you are at the apex of 2 is a lot of fun to see, oh, what does that do to me? Am I just sweeping past 3? Am I headed towards 3? And that's a lot of speed over a lot of time to be picked up there as well. But that's down to the individual. Play with that apex. 1 foot off, another half foot off, a half a car off, and you'll notice some pretty big differences on carrying the speed through that complex.
Yeah,
I'll agree with that. It's a great place to try different techniques, and it's a fun set of corners.
Yeah, somebody actually posted it in the chat, and I personally agree. In the momentum car, I drive a low horsepower car. It's actually about the distance between 2 and 3. So in the lower horsepower car, which turns well, it's about shortening the distance between 2 and 3. So it's always as much at the apex of 2 as possible, as much of the straight line to 3, but full throttle and very short distance. And then figuring out how to turn into 3, and then maybe compromise some of the 4.
I think what the general takeaway is, everybody is that don't force your car to get all the way over to
Left.
set up, turn 4. You're putting more stress on the car, and the benefits are minimal.
Yep. Okay. And I think the point about experimenting, Tom, is right on, because this is a challenging sequence, and it is very dependent on many factors. And so, great place to try different things to see what works for you and your car. And yes, to do what Dyke described and what Tom, I think you just said, you worked your way up to it. That's what you would have to do, because once you have the line to do that, you're really booking into 4. You're going fast, and you're not going to do that all in one bite. You need to work your way up to that. So, but good input from everybody, because this is one of those sections where there isn't just one answer. This is you can see I think everybody here knows what this looks like, but Dyke, to your point, turn 4 is pretty flat. There's not much banking, to help with this corner. You can see that in here. So now turn 5, which has the hill in the middle of it, is one where we really have to respect that hill, because we don't want to be on the gas too soon. And also we really want, this is a corner where we really want to be driving on the curb here. So if you're not driving on the apex curb here, you should be. There are several ways to approach this corner. The line we typically teach is to line up the curbing on the left and then turn in near the end of it, and drive over the hill on the curb on the right. Apex is blind, right? But here's the curbing at the top, and we want the right wheel right on that curbing. Everybody here, I think, knows that the reason we want to do that is we run out of road. We'd like the road to go left here, and it goes right. So we want to use every inch we can to the right of the track here to take advantage coming over. And if you're in a powerful car, you have to be careful, how soon you get on the gas, because the car will get light at the top here if you're on too much too soon. This is another corner where if you do run into trouble, drive the thing off. There's a huge field off to the left here, but lots of spins typically happen at this corner from people typically being either typically too soon on the gas, sometimes on the wrong line, but more often too much gas too soon. But it is easy to not get all the way onto the apex here. And I'm always surprised when I ride with someone to find, in an advanced group, to find that they're not putting the right side on the apex curbing here. Comments, questions on this corner? I don't claim to be an expert on this particular corner for sure.
Well, just the one bailout that you can do here is, if you're carrying way too much speed, don't be afraid to break into the hill. The hill stabilizes the car.
Right.
So if you really, if you come in there hot and you think, I really am going to, fly over the top of this,
yeah,
you can break up to the apex cone. The car will just push itself into the hill. It stays straight.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And in fact, there are drivers who don't even go all the way track left here, who just, come up, brake hard into the hill, make the corner sharper, but it's slow anyway, right? And turn and go across the top of the hill. So Yeah, good.
Hey. You guys, Bruce Corbin here. I'm just curious. Are any of you feathering the brake right at turn in for 5 to rotate?
I'm not sure I know what you mean by feathering. You can trail brake here, and you probably would trail brake some here, although as soon as you get the car into the hill, it's probably going to turn anyway. But
Okay. I sometimes I'll just a light brush of the brake there to help rotate the car left to get up onto that apex curbing on the right. Just something I found was a little helpful. I was just wondering if anybody else did that.
No, yeah, it works. That works.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think another one, Bill, is a lot of drivers don't take full advantage of the track out after that corner. Kind of cut it off, thinking, oh, I need to get over to the right, and they're not taking full advantage of the track out and being able to get on the gas sooner and manage that corner better, because they're, most of the time I think we have the cone way down at the end, which is fine. But people, like, they don't go out there. And, especially student drivers, if you're an instructor, student drivers don't go out there. And when they start that habit, they start pinching that corner and they start getting on the gas, they're going to end up on the right eventually.
Yep.
So I think, we need to keep stressing to ourselves, use that track out, because that's all gas time. And you're really smoothing out. It seems like a longer arc, but man, you're on the gas a lot sooner, a lot longer.
Yeah, and so you're actually opening up the track to turn 6 if you do what you just indicated by staying to the left.
Exactly.
yeah, that's a good.
I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, I find that over there, if I'm out to the left, I can get on the gas a lot quicker and just, it opens up into turn 6 and you carry a tremendous amount of speed through there.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. No, Tom, I'm glad you made that point, because that is a common mistake that people don't, get over left here. And to Howard's point, it does, simplify, 6. And I mean, this section, through 6 into 7 is very fast. And yeah, we need all the help we can get here. So for sure. Turn 7. The turn that so many people screw up. I don't understand why. Well, I guess people want to go fast through a slow turn, but as we just said, we're coming fast. The brake markers are way too late. They entice you to want to brake at the bridge or after it, which in most cars is way too late. And this is a 90-degree corner, and there's not much banking here either. And now that said, this is not a hard corner. This should not be a hard corner, but I guarantee that on Saturday and Sunday, there'll be a bunch of cars off here. Hopefully just in the dirt, since there's a lot of dirt. But the common mistake here is braking way too late, number one, and number two, way too much trail brake. Because yes, it's fast coming in, but what's after this corner? A long straight section, right? So we need to exit this corner. And the apex is early in this corner.
Yep.
And so that's another reason why braking late here doesn't make any sense. As a sidebar to that, a lot of people will come booking under the bridge and they won't even stay all the way track right till the turn in. They'll start to cheat the turn in. I don't know why this corner invites people to do that, but I've seen it too many times. So, this is a corner to, think slow in, fast out, even though it doesn't have to be overly slow, but it's going to feel slow after the speed you've carried, out of 6. So if you're one of those who's tempted to brake late and carry trail brake here, tell yourself slow in, fast out, and break yourself of that habit.
For whatever reason, that corner seems to have good grip on the first turn in and to mid corner, and then it just all goes away after that. So it's almost one of those corners that make your corrections, before you get to full throttle, because there's grip in the track there. But if you roll too much speed and you get I don't know if there's a banking change or whatever it is, but it seems like if you're sliding wide, the track is not going to support you. It's just going to help you slide wide. So, but the first half of the turn, it always feels positive. It always has good grip. So it's a weird turn in that respect. It has grip in, no grip out.
Yep, that's true.
Are you on the curbing on the right, tracking out of 7? Are you putting 2 wheels onto that curbing on the right before straightening out and heading down towards the light bulb?
You can. It's not. It's one of those curbs that's reasonably friendly, so you can. My general view on curbs like that is if you use them as margin, that's good. If you're going to if you're going to plan on using all of that curb every lap, then you have no margin left. But
I think a better way to answer that question is, when do you get to wide open throttle?
Yeah, that's true.
So if you're going on the curbs and you're out there, but you're not fully committed to throttle, you're actually giving up time. So, right. So the perfect exit of that turn was that you pick up the throttle early, you get the grip in, and you're full throttle, but you don't need that outside curving. That would be the perfect exit of that turn.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. No, that's a great clarification, Doug.
Yeah, and is what you see a lot of times, you can see where the dirt is at the end of that rumble strip on the track out. There's usually a big hole in the dirt after it, and that's a really good sign. You don't want to be there, because one, it's not fun, and two, man, you're like a day and a half away from being on the throttle if you're out there and not on the throttle. So it's kind of like, think about where you are, and exactly what Dyke said is, when are you on the throttle and what are you doing? Managing the car through the rumble strips. Oh, and now I'm on the gas.
Yep.
A lot of distance is passed before you're on the gas if you're way out there.
Yep.
Okay.
Bill, to Dyke's point about turn 1, go to the next slide. Look at all the tire marks to the left.
Yep. Well, let me just make one point. Turn in here is more or less the end of the curbing. As I said before, not everybody stays all the way right here. And then, if you cheat in, 6 or 8 feet early by a couple of feet, you're going to make this corner a lot harder. So and apex is pretty early here. And part of the reason is I think, what Dyke just said, there's good grip early in this corner, and we want to make this a, relatively speaking, sharp corner to get the car turned so we can get back on the gas, as Dyke just said. So take advantage of that and head up the hill here.
Just one other caveat: if you blow that corner and you're late going in, that's not a this corner defies the safe line is the late line. It doesn't work there. So if you're turning past the apex cone, it's not a safer way through it. It's really, you've got to be on that apex, and I believe it's a little safer because of the grip to be early than late.
Yeah, and I think just to add to this, I actually 100% agree with you, Dyke. And what I'm struggling a lot with this corner, and though I've never actually walked the track, but I convinced myself that in this turn, there is a perfect turning point and making it to the apex where you have a camber. And if you miss that like turning point where the camber carries you to the apex, you're losing time no matter what you do. If you turn in too early, you're in trouble in the dirt. If you turn in too late, you just don't have that camber. There's like this perfect turning point where the camber brings it to the apex, and then you're perfectly set to being like basically flat out.
I agree with you. When it works, it's like, oh, why can't I do that every time? When it doesn't,
exactly. But it's so difficult to get it consistent. It's like it's one of the most difficult turns. I still can't find a perfect reference to reproduce it consistently from like lap to lap. To find that like perfect camber. We need to do the track walk there, I think.
If you get the grip there, to Dyke's point, Alex, you can really get on the gas smoothly and early there and really start to gain some speed.
Yeah, 100% agree, but it's like finding that reference point to turn in to make this connection from turning to apex and this perfect camber is what is really struggling. It's like, where is that reference? I tried.
Well, Alex, you just described for yourself what your objective should be for the first run is to find that turning point.
Yeah, sounds good.
All those tires going off to the left, is that because they early apex there and try to save it? You would think go off to the right. If you early apex, you could run out of track and go off right. All those tire marks are going off left. Why?
Well, the answer to that, Bruce, is that if you get into a corner early or more likely too hot, and instead of driving it off, because you have a whole field on the right here, if instead of driving it off you lift, you're going to hit that tire wall. So that tire wall's there for the people who get in too hot and lift.
Gotcha.
Okay.
The other point I'd like to make, because I did spend some money on this corner, is to Dyke's mentioning about the second half of the turn. I find when I find myself on the rumbles there, they're always sandy. And I think when you look at the picture, you can see the amount of sand that does get churned up there. And I think that may also contribute to some of the slip there.
Yep. Certainly doesn't help. Yep. Okay. All right. Light bulb. There's a couple of lines through here, but it's hard to see in this diagram. There's a culvert down right by the apex. So as you approach this corner, if you look off to the right, you can see the culvert, and that tells you where the apex is, which is a nice visual way to look ahead here. Some people come in high and then bring the car down and apex and out. Other people, myself included, come in low to mid banking and then pick up the same line. I like that line because it's a little hard to see, but they're just past the tire wall. As we enter, there's a section that's kind of straight on, straight on the right here. Sorry about that. Come on. And coming in, you can brake in this straight line, whatever amount of braking you need to do, and but don't over brake, let the momentum throw you into the banking, basically. Mm-hmm. And if you do that properly, your momentum will carry you half the way to the apex, and then you can, kind of pick the car up, turn it a touch toward the apex, and start to exit the corner. So there's lots of lines through here and different techniques. That's the one I happen to like. I know there are people who like the higher line and claim it works as well. Questions, comments are welcome.
Hey, Bill, I think for this, because the banking is pretty extreme, you have plenty of grip, right? So I think the key here for a turn like this is distance traveled. So the line that you said you preferred is a shorter distance.
Correct.
Right, and I think that's important for folks to think about, because if there's grip, then you just want to travel the lower, the shorter distance, right? Versus going high and then coming back in.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree with that. Yeah, absolutely right. It is significantly shorter, which is to me a big plus as well. Yep.
Yeah, plus you've increased the length of the straight at gas between 7, 8, 9. So you've effectively created a longer straight for yourself before that turn.
Correct. Yep. Yep. So, anyway, and there is a ton of grip here. You know, you can kind of work your way up to finding out how much is here in baby steps. Okay. All right. So that's, whoops, let me back up. I should have taken this snapshot a little bit earlier, but you can just see the end of that straight section on the right here. And we're kind of aimed at this gap in the wall. And just, I describe it to my students as, let's just throw the car into the banking, only brake less than you think you need to, let the bankings slow the car down the last little bit, because we can't do anything in the first part of the corner anyway. So let's use it to scrub off speed if we need to scrub off speed, and but not to the point where it screws up getting the car pointed at the apex. Okay, so and this is kind of what it looks like here and from the apex. And of course, everybody on this call knows about, knows that, as we exit the light bulb, yes, we can pass on the right, but the track over the hill comes back to the right. So we have to be very careful going over the hill here. Plus, it is pit in over the hill. So not a great setup. So we've talked about all this, driving off on turn 1, handling turn 5 right, handling turn 7, and pit in. So other questions on the track itself or corners or anything else about Lightning before we wrap it up? Everybody's got it figured out.
Ready to set up the best times on the weekend.
All right, everyone have fun. And thank you for joining us tonight. See you soon.
Thanks,
Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
See you on the weekend.